Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to April 29th Public Works Committee meeting. The first item on our agenda is to have a roll call and determination of quorum. Brenda, if you please.
Estes. Here. Nordstrom.
Here.
Roberts. Scott. Here. Clayton. Here. We have a quorum.
Here. Thank you.
If it is, in this case, he's against.
Okay. I'm getting a lot of speaker request forms for item number 18, and as soon as I get down to that item, I will like to address the audience, and we're really appreciative of all the people that are interested in this topic and coming forward, and I'm about to make a presentation. So as soon as our one committee member is missing, what we would like to do now is open this up for, excuse me, I need to do an adoption of the agenda. Is there any? Thank you. Moved and second to adopt the agenda. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Thank you for the enthusiastic response. Now is the time for the general comment from the members of the public to discuss or express concerns to the committee on any issue not limited to items on the agenda. Action will not be taken at this meeting on any issue not on the agenda except by placement on the agenda by unanimous vote of the council's members present. And I also wish to remind the public that please turn off your cell phones or to place them on the vibrate position. And if you need to make a call or receive a call, could you take that into the hallway, please? Thank you. And at this time, I do not have any speaker request forms on general public comment. And I just wanted to make sure I'm not missing anybody in the audience either. And now we will go on to our consent items 1 through 14. Is there any, again, I do not have any public comments on items 1 through 14. I've got quite a stack here in front of me, but I want to just make sure that there is no one here wishing to speak on items 1 through 14. Thank you. At this time, I will take comments from the council members to see if there is anyone to remove items from the consent agenda items. And the chair will recognize Amanda Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent items.
Second.
Well, okay. Or sorry, folks, we're used to having many items pulled off the agenda. So the motion is to approve consent items 1 through 14. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to the items 15 through 20. And again, I do have several public comments on item number 18 here in front of me. And I just want to give the public an awareness that there is consideration on the committee members to take this to a full council meeting Monday night without recommendation. Now, that's just a consensus. We haven't voted on that, but that seems to be the approach on it. So if those people that want to speak on item 18, we will surely give you that opportunity, but we wanted to advise you that you would probably be doing the same comments again Monday evening. Again, I don't want to cut off public comments on item number 18, but I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. And then what we do on the public comment on item 18, on any of our items on the agenda, is to allow you 3 minutes for presentation. The green light is for start time. Yellow is you've got a few seconds remaining, and red light is when we ask you to wrap up your comments. The other ground rule on the public comments is, please, if you could for us, because of the number of comments, is to refrain from repeating what other speakers have brought up. And again, I don't want to cut you off, but just in the order of understanding that explaining it to us once should be sufficient. Now, I need a couple, 3 times to hear it again, but if you could refrain from repeating other speakers' comments. And again, just to advise you that we are looking forward to sending this to council without recommendation, so these comments would be beneficial at the Monday night council meeting as a whole. And usually the way I proceed on this is during the public comment sections, we do the proponents first, and then we go to the opponents. Okay, and then if that's understood, everybody understands the ground rules. If you want to use your microphone, please, Brad. Go ahead, you have the floor.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Chair, but I do believe you have one speaker request form for item 17
Okay,
prior to we beginning on 18. Thanks.
thank you. Item 17.
Mike Gould.
Mr. Gould? Mike, if you would like to come forward and give us your presentation for 3 minutes at the podium, thank you.
I'm Mike Gould. I'm here on behalf of the Firehouse, as well as I'm joined today with Larry Blody from First Stop. Basically, we have a cookie cutter situation. On January 7th, about 2 o'clock in the morning, I got a call to come down and look at a 5-foot geyser that was boiling over in the middle of the road in front of the Firehouse restaurant. Basically, a valve on the side of a water main had failed. On February 23rd, my friend Larry got the same phone call. I don't think it was 2 o'clock in the morning, though. But it's later determined that the cause of the break was the result of a failed valve, and we hired Nelson Excavation to come in and do emergency repairs that evening, and Larry had to do the same thing 1 month later, basically. Last month, we met with Keith Lesperance, Risk Management, and Terry Wolterstorff, Public Works Director. Together, we looked at the relevant city ordinances that would address the situation. Basically, the ordinance implies that the valve is our responsibility. However, Ordinance 1308-110 goes on to say that we can't touch it. we can't even look at it, to be very honest with you, without the city's utility maintenance group being first to be able to do that, which makes sense. I mean, because you're talking about a valve going on a water main. Makes sense from a safety standpoint in my mind. But as business owners, we do not have the opportunity of maintenance here. We don't have the opportunity for inspection for wear, rust, or any other damage that may occur to that pipe. And this valve is located, mind you, some 25 feet from our business in the center of Main Street. So it'd be a little cumbersome for us to be able to do anything to it, and it's about 8 to 10 feet down in the middle of the road. About 1992, the city put these in. The city specs at that time were followed. The valves were expected to last 50 years. They've lasted less than half of that due to these faulty bolts. To remedy the issue today, the code requires the use of stainless steel bolts. The ones that we had were not stainless steel. They were metal, and they just basically turned to dust on us. To fix the problem, the city is planning to replace all of the valves, my understanding. Terry certainly could speak directly to that, from East Boulevard, I believe, all the way down to West Boulevard, on Main Street, and up on St. Joseph Street. Inasmuch as we've already completed the repairs in advance of this project, what Larry and I are here today is we're just asking for reimbursement for the cost of our excavation and the repair of these valves. So I will leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. Gould. And please stand by just in case when this item comes up on our agenda, stand by for questioning. Thank you for your presentation. Item number 18 is the next public speaker comment forms that I have here in front of me. is that, again, just to remind the audience that this is probably going to city council without recommendation, and so the full hearing by the whole council would be the intent of what this committee is intending to do. We haven't taken a vote on this or made any official action, but that's the consensus at this point. So again, just please make comments to new items that haven't been spoken to by previous speakers. Again, this is for the proponents of the proposal, and item number 18 is from Mr., help me with the name, Curdell Reinhold? Mr. Reinhold, if you'd take your place at the podium and identify yourself for the committee.
Thank you. My name is Cordell Rimbold. I live on Ridgeview Road in Enchanted Hills. I was one of the individuals that was requested to take around petitions after we had a board meeting, an Enchanted Hills board meeting. And we collected 103 signatures on a petition within a very short period of time. And we could have doubled that number very, very quickly for with people, or the names of people who wanted those poles removed on Stoomer Road. And during the time that we took around petitions, we found a number of comments from the citizens in that area. One of the comments was that since those apartments were built down there, every home and every vehicle down in the lower end of Enchantment Hills has been broken into. Well, if that's the case, then it's a law enforcement problem. Law enforcement should be working with the community or the members that live down there and get that problem solved. The other comment we heard was that some of the citizens have nearly had their dogs or their pets run over. Well, we have a leash law in Rapid City. Animals are supposed to be confined. The other one I found very interesting was that a couple of the residents up there said that the city councilwoman that represents them said that if we remove those poles down on Stoomer Road, it would increase the traffic on Enchantment Road by 2,000 vehicles per day. Well, they must have been using the same calculator the IRS uses to figure out my taxes every year. 2,000 vehicles every day is unrealistic. But it all boils down to the fact that that is a city road paid for by city taxpayers. It should be open for use by all of the citizens in the area so that they can use that road effectively to come out of Enchantment Hills to get to Walmart or wherever else they want to go. And like I say, if they're having problems down there, they say it's because of the people that live in those apartments, then contact law enforcement and get that problem settled. That's all I have to say at this point. We feel as though the enthusiasm for removing those poles was tremendous from the citizens that we contacted. And we could have easily doubled the number of signatures we had on the petitions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reinhold. The next person I have as a proponent is Mr. Alan McPherson. And if you'll identify yourself for the committee members. And
my name is Al McPherson at 5311 Dan Christie Lane. I think each of you have a copy of my statement. The original purpose of Stoomer was to encouraging further development and overall access in that area. It is our understanding that the city and Walmart had a construction agreement to close Stoomer. We don't understand how that would benefit Walmart at all. We were not aware of any meeting about the closure of Stumer until we saw it published in the paper that it was going to be closed. Also, it is my understanding that a small group of 10 to 12 people and a lawyer as a spokesman met with the council requesting the closure of Stumer, and Stumer was subsequently closed. I apologize if I got this incorrectly, but it seemed pretty obvious. The closure restricts access by emergency vehicles, such as fire department, police department, ambulance, and even school buses. The closure blocks direct access to Walmart and other businesses down the hill. Just to go to Walmart, we have to drive a half-mile west on Catron, make a U-turn, and drive another half-mile back just ahead in the direction of Walmart. Or we have to drive down to 5th Street and make a right to get to Walmart and the other stores. If Stumer was open, we can easily drive to Walmart or have simple access to Black Hills Boulevard and give us access to Catron. If we want to go out of town taking Catron, we again have to drive half mile this way, half mile that way. And when we want to go up to 79 and go any place else, we still are inconvenienced. That access road on Stumer is very important to us. Finally, this is a neighborhood, not a small group's private domain. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McPherson. I see, Mr. McPherson, you can just nod your head if you, did you want this document entered into the records as well? Sure. Okay. Thank you. Again, this is for the proponents, Mr. Al Fisher. Is he present? Oh, okay. Mr. Fisher, just a clarification, I understand you're against the removal?
I am. That's what I talked to Mr. Estes about.
Okay.
And I am against.
Okay, we've got you marked down as a proponent, and
Shall
you're
I
the
sit
last
down?
one anyway, so I don't mind starting off with you as being in opposition for
Very good.
the
My name is Al
opponents.
Fisher. I live at 204 Enchantment Road. It's in the corner of Enchantment Road and Enchanted Pines Road. And there's a lot of traffic by there. It comes down Stumer all the way from Highway 16. And the people up there are perfectly entitled to use that road to get to where they want. The best thing the street department ever did was to close Stumer Road. The only thing they could improve on is to plow it up, plant grass and trees in there. The problem is not with the people who live above Stumer Road, and they have nothing to lose in this. We have everything to lose because we live down where all the traffic goes by. Their traffic isn't going to increase. They might be inconvenienced, as he said, about going to Walmart. What a shame. And we would end up with all the traffic from the apartment area. Before Stumer was closed, there was a tremendous amount of traffic coming down Stumer because it's a shortcut for the people from the Eagle Ridge apartments. Now those apartments have been doubled in size. There are twice as many people there, twice as many cars. And I was going to offer you an invitation to come down to my place after you vote to open Stumer Road sometime between 7 and 8 in the morning and 5 and 6 in the evening, and give you an imitation of the Santa Monica Freeway in Los Angeles. There will be cars backed up all the way from Enchanted Pines Boulevard to Stumer waiting to get around the corner, at least those who stop for the stop sign, many of which do not. And it's very discouraging to imagine that all that traffic is going to be going by my house day and night. And again, the people up above Stumer have nothing to lose. We have everything to lose. We'll be back on Monday. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification on the position statement, Mr. Fisher. I just want to make sure, is there any other proponents of this item that I'm missing? I'm not seeing any other proponents. And again, now I'm going to move on to the opponents for this item. In no particular order is Mr. Walter Kajar. Just to remind you, Mr. Gerard, if you'll introduce yourself, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Walter Kerr, live at 208,
My apologies for mispronouncing here.
happens all the time, 208 Enchantment Road. My wife and I oppose the removal of the barriers at Stumer Road. And I've listed 3 reasons why we oppose that. First of all, these barriers were installed as one of the conditions for the building of Walmart on Stumer Road. The Rapid City Council recognized that there would be a great increase in traffic on Stumer Road and Enchantment Road as a result of Walmart. Now the area along Stumer Road is filling in with more businesses on the outlots of Walmart, a new fuel stop, and I've heard that there will be a new fast food restaurant located in that area. These would add to the traffic. The area that would be affected most by the barrier removal is near Stumer Road onto Enchantment Road and to Enchanted Pines, then on over to 5th Street. Little traffic would continue up Enchantment Road to Mount Rushmore Road. Number 2, residents who own a home take pride in their neighborhood. We don't like to see litter and trash thrown into the street, which was a problem before the barriers were installed. Neighbors picked up this litter on an almost daily basis, and I can only imagine how much more there would be if the barriers would be removed. And number 3, the discussion here today is that of convenience for some drivers by the removal of the barriers versus the burden of added traffic and safety on the section of the residential neighborhood street. Please don't allow this street to become a business loop. My wife and I are opposed to the removal of the barriers. Thank you.
The next speaker request form I have here is Ken Callahan.
Thank you.
Mr. Callahan, go ahead.
My name is Kenneth Callanan. I live at 217 Enchantment Road. We bought our townhouse there new about 6 years ago. So we live below, we are actually like Cordell mentioned, the people that live down below. One of the ones that experienced the traffic, but you know, a guy can stand here and talk about his selfish needs anytime on any subject, but what I think for the city, we've got a good situation now with Walmart, and we actually, my wife and I, were for the Walmart. We're not one of the people that were against that, but you know, you've got your traffic handled right now with good stop signs, intersections. You open up Stumer, we're going to have stoplights all the way, and I don't know how long it takes, but everybody here knows that Walmart creates its own traffic patterns, and it's just like opening up an opportunity to tear up another street, you might say. And I don't know, but I'm sure there's some construction people here that are aware of the quality of the base material all along Enchantment Road. That shale moves and wiggles every time something heavy goes across it. And it's a mess now from just the hailstorm we had a few years ago there. All the folks that had to come up with siding and shingles and everything else, and then the weather, this road is just bumpy and weavy. If you change the traffic flow there, and everybody that lives above thinks they aren't going to get any traffic, I believe if I was on 16 and wanted to go to Walmart, I'd cut down by the water tower down Enchantment all the way down to Walmart rather than have to figure my way back out across, you know. So there's going to be more traffic. That road's going to be a mess, and that's going to cost the city more money. And I guess that's all I had to say, and my wife and I both believe that the Walmart's a good deal, Stumer being closed is a good deal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Callahan. The next speaker request form I have here is Mr. John Ward. Mr. Ward? And while Mr. Ward is making his way, the next person I've got here is Dale Landy. And you'll be next.
My name is John Warden. I live at 306 Stoomer Road, which is Stoomer and Enchantment Road on the corner. A lot of the items that I had have been touched on, so I won't waste your time with that. I will add that one of the proponents mentioned they didn't have any idea that this road was being closed. That's because this thing did not affect them at that time, so they showed no interest in what was going on then. Now they can't drive 2 minutes out of their way, and it's a problem.
Thank you, Mr. Ward.
We're against it, for the record.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ward. Mr. Landy, I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. And then the next speaker will be Mike Howell. And again, Mr. Landy, just introduce yourself for the committee.
My name is Dale Landis, and I live at 209 Enchantment Road. And I also could voice some of the same concerns, but I have a question, I guess, to start with. Why access now to Walmart? Why are they so concerned, the homeowners up above us? They had the opportunity to have Walmart in their backyard, only they chose to fight it and get it and didn't support it. Now that it's down here and we're involved with all the traffic, now they have concern. It seems like the shoe's on the other foot, so that's my concern. Where were you if you wanted Walmart so much, why didn't you have it up there? Easy access, right out your back door off 16. A little bit of inconvenience for you to go around for you doesn't erase the large safety concerns that we all have down there with the amount of traffic that comes by. Most of us are retirement age, but we have a lot of grandchildren that come over and visit with us and stay with us. And I've seen the traffic come down that road, and when before the barriers went up, it was unreal the amount of traffic. Now you've put more townhomes on those corners that you come down there, and it's a blind curve coming down around there. All the increased traffic is just waiting for accidents to happen if you open that back up. I think the efforts of the homeowners up above us would have been better served if they would have petitioned the State Department to have extended Dan Christie out across Catron and have made the road go across to come back down into Walmart. All this could have been avoided, this hassle that's going on right now. That is really where the road should have been. I agree that those bollards should come out completely and it be turned to grass. That's the only safety that makes sense, the only solution that makes sense for the safety of everyone concerned.
Thank you, Mr. Landis. Mike Howell is next, and then Kelly Douglas after that. Mr. Howell.
Yes, my name is Mike Howell, and I live on Stoomer Road. And I just wanted to come down to say that I'm strongly enough against this that just wanted to come down and voice my opinion on it. I didn't live there before the barricades were put up. I wouldn't even have bought my lot if it had been open through the way they're talking about doing it. But you know, the two issues that I've heard today is people are concerned with taking an extra minute to drive around now that what I drive every day and don't think nothing about it to go to Walmart around the corner to get to Fifth Street. And then they talk about emergency vehicles. Well, I rode around in an emergency vehicle for 21 years as a policeman. And I can tell you for a fact, if I had to get to Stoomer Road, I could most likely nearly all the time get there faster the way I would go now than trying to cut through Walmart there with traffic you would have to weave through to try to get to Stoomer Road. So I don't see that either one of those are really a very, very good issue. The other thing that really concerns me is when something like this comes up, if I hadn't caught the tail end of it on the news, I wouldn't even have been aware of it. And I really wish there was some way the city could notify the homeowners, especially on just a close surrounding area like that, when an issue comes up that would affect them so much. A lot of people on Stoomer Road probably don't even know this is going on and won't till the barricades are taken down, if that would be the case. And I think that's wrong in its of itself right there. If you don't happen to have a TV on the right channel, you wouldn't even know this was going on, because I doubt if they got any petitions signed on Stoomer Road. I didn't know nothing about a petition till this, till I seen it on TV. So that's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Kelly Douglas. And then the next speaker will be, I hope I'm pronouncing this, Tonette Brown will be next. Mr. Douglas, introduce
Hi.
yourself again.
My name's Kelly Douglas. I live at 235 Enchantment Road. And I don't want to duplicate what most of the guys, I feel the same way they do. So I don't want to duplicate too much
Thank you.
About what they have to say. I did sit on my back deck about the time that just before they closed Stoomer Road off. Coming out of the apartment buildings, I sat there and had coffee in the morning for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. There was 18 cars came out of the parking lot from the apartment buildings. 6 of them went east on Stoomer Road. 12 of them came west and came down Enchantment Road where we live. Now, if that's not a traffic increase, I don't know what is. And also, I want to say I feel very sorry for the people that have to drive an extra half a mile to pass Stoomer Road and come around to get to Walmart. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Douglas. I hope I'm pronouncing the first name, Tonette Brown. Next speaker will be Jay Alderman.
Yes, you said it correctly. Tonette Brown.
Yeah, I got
live
one.
on Enchantment Road as well.
We'll give you 3 minutes.
I don't have that much more to add. I did just want to point out in the part that I took place in not wanting Walmart in was primarily traffic related. And where I live, the traffic would definitely increase. The specifics about that, the studies are made and everything. The city councilmen know that information. But the part that the proponents may not know about or didn't read up on is the fact that the bollards didn't extend initially across onto the sidewalks, and now they do because the city officials determined they needed to be there. So the emergency access wasn't as needed in the way that you were trying to extend. So that's the only thing I have to add.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Next one is Jay Alderman, and then following him will be Mark Stulken.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jay Alderman, 303 Enchantment Road. As I've said, some of you probably recognize me from 3 years ago, the last time that we've gone through this. We're basically setting at ground zero is the terms I use. Our house is literally at the corner. And I could regale you with an hour of stories, not hearsay, but personal observations of the traffic, the trash, the issues that we've suffered, quite frankly. And the one bright spot out of all of this was the final closure of Stoomer Road. My neighbor and I had been there before the apartment complex, before Walmart, and we gradually observed the first phase of the apartment complex be built, then the second phase, and then Walmart. I was involved in one of the committees that were appointed or put together by the city to meet with emergency management services, neighbors. I believe Robert Green, if I have the name in my memory bank right, was kind of the lead spokesman for the Walmart store. And it was quite a process, and that went on, as you know, a long time. A lot of this was vetted out very carefully. And the bottom line is Stoomer gets closed not on a whim and not without a lot of concern from traffic engineering to Walmart to community input. And I guess I appreciate the fact that we could have an opportunity perhaps to visit Monday night with the full council, so I'll keep it short. But, you know, I'd like folks to remember that two words that have come up here that I think are really imperative for us to remember, and that is convenience and community. You know, I'm in the same circumstance. I have to drive down Enchantment Road, Enchantment Pines Drive, 5th Street, hook around to Walmart, come back, and I shop there. So I haven't avoided Walmart. I'd like to come in Dan Christie Road to my house. It'd be really quick, but that's closed off, and I'm not doing a petition to open that. And community, it's inconvenient maybe for a lot of folks, but there's a reason why that needed to be closed. It's the least, frankly, that the city of Rapid City and the designing and this development could do for those folks that are most impacted. And believe me, 2,000 cars a day, that wouldn't shock me. It would be horrible if that street were opened again. So I'm very much opposed to opening Stumer, and I appreciate the opportunity to address you briefly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alderman. The last speaker I have is Mr. Mark Stolken.
Hi, you got it right, Mark Stolken at 307 Enchantment Road. I don't have a whole lot more to add. We went through this countless times. We stood up here 7, 8 times speaking about Walmart, the roads and everything like that. We met with Vicki before. It's, as Jay said, it's about convenience, inconvenience. A lot of people would say, was it inconvenient not to have a Walmart on that side of town? Well, the convenience is there. You got to drive a little bit farther to get there. Not to be snarky about any of this stuff. It's just the people that sign this petition don't even live on Enchantment Road. They live on an offshoot of Enchantment Road. 90% of them are on Panorama Circle, Ridgeview Road, and I didn't get a knock on my door as far as signing a petition to ask whether or not I wanted it open. The closest person to the road or to the closure is about the 600 block of Enchantment Road, so they should be going down to where the people that actually the traffic affects them the most, and see what they think about it, rather than the people that don't even that can't even see Walmart and see what they think about it. We'll see you Monday. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Stolken. And I just wanted to make sure that I've not missed anybody that wanted to speak on item number 18. Any others that wanted to speak on item number 18? Yes, sir, if you'll come forward and identify yourself and for the committee members. And just a refresher, you have 3 minutes, okay?
Thanks. My name is Chris Kilpatrick. I live at 304 Enchantment Road. And again, I don't want to reiterate what's been said here today, but I think actions speak louder than words, and for us to take time out of our day to come down here and voice our concerns rather than just signing a piece of paper and saying we'd sure be convenient to have that opened says a lot about our community and where we're at. And the one gentleman that mentioned it is a neighborhood. I've got a 4-year-old and a 9-year-old, and I realize you always try to control your kids, but it isn't always the easiest thing to do. And to open up the traffic and have my kids exposed to additional traffic is certainly a concern, and I'm fully opposed to this measure. Thanks.
Thank you. Again, I'll just ask one more time to see if I've missed anybody wants to make a public comment. And I do want to applaud you folks that acted very civil, very professional on your comments, and thank you for doing that and giving us a sense of good decorum. Thank you for that. Now we'll move on to items number 15 through 20, and we will be taking these items one at a time by the committee members. And item 15 is the oversized agreement with Yasmin Dream LLC for Elderberry Boulevard in Orchard Meadows subdivision. Okay, they were told in advance. Okay. All right. Just to clarify, what was taken off mic here was that informing the participants that are leaving the room right now about informing them about coming to the public comments during full council meeting. They will have that opportunity one more time. Okay. Did I clarify that? Okay. just to make sure the public has one more opportunity to come forward on this. Item 15 is the oversized agreement. I do not have any speaker requests on this item, but if I may go to City Engineer Dale Tech, do you want to handle this one for me? Give us a little background on what we're going to be dealing with. And
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Per the direction of the City Council at the April 7th City Council meeting, staff was directed to draft an oversized agreement and bring to the April 29th Public Works Committee meeting. We have done that in support of the applicant's engineer, provided information for the agreement. The agreement is attached to the agenda, as well as a memo from myself, once again recommending denial. However, it's certainly the committee's decision to make whether or not to approve that. I would also like to point out that if you do approve it, a funding source for the amount requested would have to be identified.
Thank you, Mr. Tech. The chair will now recognize Alderwoman Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. May I ask the City Attorney, Joel Ledeen, a question, please?
You may.
Joel, you provided City Council members information regarding the procedure that is in place to consider oversized agreements, and I believe that there were some conflicts that were brought up. Would you mind expounding on that and clarifying?
I believe what you're referring to is the ordinance requires that any oversized request come to the council or come to staff prior to approval of the plat for the subdivision and be approved prior to that. This application was submitted after the approval of the plat for the subdivision, so technically does not comply with the ordinance for oversize.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, may I ask Vicki Fisher a question, please?
You certainly may.
Hi, Vicki. Would you mind, I understand that this, if I can say it right, I always want to say it backwards, Orchard Meadows subdivision is being developed in phases. And so if that is one of the requirements, as the city attorney has said, that an oversized agreement should be part of the platting process, does that offer an opportunity for this to go back, or is it done? I mean, technically, in order to follow our ordinance, we should deny this at this point because the oversized agreement should have been taken into account when this subdivision was brought to the planning.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Fisher.
Thank you. This is being developed in phases. If there were some oversizing expenditures that would serve the needs of every phase, such as a water improvement, then it would be appropriate that it may come at that phase. If it's for street improvements that are specific to the phase that had a final plat already approved for it, then that portion would be after the fact. And I think that might be the case in this case.
That was my understanding as well, as far as just getting the information and going back and looking at this, is that the phase that abuts Highway 44 is the commercial portion of this. And the lanes that the applicant was bringing for consideration for an oversize are all contained within this first phase of this subdivision plat. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
And that's already been entered into a final plat at this time?
Final plat's been recorded at Register of Deeds.
Thank you. Thank you for answering my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Just to remind the committee, I do not have a motion on the floor at this time. If I may deviate here for just a moment, Mr. Lentry, there was an email that was sent to the committee members from Mr. Shaffey. Are you familiar with that email?
Yes, I am.
Do you know if Mr. Shaffey would like that attached to our agenda so that we could see that email for Monday night's full council consideration?
Yes, that was the intent, to attach
Thank you.
the email and the legal opinion.
Thank you. I know he or you have some additional supportive information, and so we will do our best to attach that to the link for Monday evening.
All right, thank you.
Alderwoman Scott, do you have some follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I make the motion to deny this request for an oversize agreement.
Motion is to deny,
I'll second for discussion.
seconded by Alderman Estes for discussion. And the floor is open for, to the committee for discussion.
Thank you, Mr.
Alderman.
Chair. Just to follow up, based on the latest information we received, I'm making the recommendation that we deny this. It will still go to council on Monday night because this is just a recommending body, and so there will be other consideration, but from this committee at this time, I would be recommending and supporting a denial of this request.
Anyone else wishing to speak to this item? And again, this is just a recommendation from the committee. Not seeing any, we will proceed to the vote. Those in favor of supporting the denial, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you, motion carries. Item 16 is acknowledged denial of funding of $116,000 for the Orchard Meadows Street oversize from the Utility Support Fund and SAB Fund Oversight Committee, and refer this to the CIP Committee.
Second.
Motion is to acknowledge by Alderwoman Scott, second by Alderman Estes to acknowledge the denial. Not seeing any discussion. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. The item 17 is water main leaks and damage to the damage for properties located at 610 and 701 Main Street. And just to remind folks that this is a request from Mr. Gold and Mr. Blody. So the floor is open to the committee members. Alderwoman Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. May I ask Mr. Wolsterstorff a question, please?
You may.
Thank you. Terry, in the public comments for this item, Mr. Gold had brought up that he had had a discussion with you. What would be the procedure at this point, based on historical references, for something like this to happen? He's obviously, First Gun and the Firehouse are both asking for reimbursements of this, and there is a project coming up. Does it take city council approval to authorize a reimbursement, or can staff work with this? Or what would your recommendation be, since these two properties had incidents that occurred before the city could actually take a look at replacing these valves?
Thank you. Yeah, we had a great meeting probably 2 months ago, maybe not quite that long ago. And really we were focused on whether or not, from a liability standpoint or an insurance standpoint, whether they could file a claim with the city. And I believe their claim was denied based on the wording in the ordinance, which basically specifies that the service line from the water main into the structure is the responsibility of the homeowner. So we certainly offered them the opportunity to come to the Public Works Committee. You know, I guess it's probably more of a question for the city attorney on the legalities of going down this road. I mean, keep in mind we have a lot of service line breaks that happen in the municipality. I don't have the exact number, but I would expect you'd probably see a couple hundred on an annual basis. They're not all of this size or create this much damage. Sometimes it's just a 1-inch service line for a home. But there's a bigger picture here to look at. From the standpoint of the project or projects we have coming forward to take care of some of these valve issues, if you recall, just a few weeks ago we rejected the first phase of the project. We had bids that came in at about $600,000, $650,000. And our estimate was around $450. In fact, we only had $400 budgeted for it. So we rejected all the bids. And to be quite frank, I've been waiting to bring forward a recommendation on what to do until this discussion happened, because it depends on what you guys do with this discussion. It may impact how we proceed with some of the other projects. Keep in mind, we had 6 years worth of projects downtown just to do Main and St. Joe from East Boulevard to West Boulevard. So it's a substantial amount of money. That's only probably the first of several projects citywide that we can and should do if we're going to take over maintenance of those service lines.
Thank you, Terry. Mr. Chair, if I may ask the city attorney a question, please?
You may, and if I may interject, that one of the suggestions that I'm going to be making, Alderwoman Scott, is that the owners work with the city attorney's office in addition to your follow-up for your question. So if I may recognize Mr. Landine.
Joel, my question is basically just on a legal basis. What are the options for these two business owners to pursue a reimbursement at this point?
Well, I think they're pursuing the option. I think the insurer has denied the claim. That doesn't mean that we couldn't settle it. The amount of the claim is already going to be under our deductible anyway. So whether the insurer settled it or you decide to settle it, the claim or resolve the claim, the money is coming out of city funds. I would ask for permission to or direction to sit down and speak with the owners. There's some, this is one of those complicated issues. I'm well aware of what the ordinance says, but there's some other considerations as well. I think it might be in the best interest to sit down and try to resolve something short of litigation. Maybe we won't be able to, but I would at least like the opportunity. I had Ryan Soy in my office when I became aware of this. We weren't involved in the initial discussion, but start doing some work and looking into the facts of it and some other legal considerations. And I think we're prepared, or pretty close to prepared, to sit down and discuss some things with these folks and then bring back a recommendation to you on how to proceed, hopefully.
Thank you, Joel. I would support that if one of my committee members up here would make that motion. Thank you. I'll yield the floor.
Thank you, Alderwoman Scott, and thank you for the clarification, Mr. Landine. And then now we will proceed to other council members here, and that'll be John Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got a question for our Public Works Director.
Mr. Walterstorff.
Terry, how many more of these breaks are you aware of in the past?
I'm only, in the downtown area, I'm aware of one other one down there, but I don't have an exact number.
Was that the one at the county?
I don't think it was the county. I think there was another one. So
Then you got another one.
Okay.
Because 3 or 4 years ago, we had one in front of the actual courthouse building. So what worries me about this is how many of them we may have come forward. Because I know this was an issue 4 years ago when that happened. And, I know that there's been other times I believe that this has happened. So I'm worried about what we do here and how it may affect other people coming forward on this. So anyway, thank you very much. If you could do a little research and find out how many more, I'd appreciate it.
If I may look to City Engineer Dale Tech for a second, do you recall that third incident?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do, and it was, I believe, the property on the north side of St. Joe in front of the courthouse. The courthouse was probably out of water when they isolated that service line to fix it, but it...
There was also one in our driveway coming into the underground parking of the courthouse. Both of those valves there, same thing. The bolts had disintegrated because they were faulty bolts. So...
And if I may follow up with Mr. Walterstorff, you're not quite ready to present a plan to us, but you're looking at some kind of contingency plan, if I may call it that, to present to this committee in the very near future?
I don't know that I'd call it contingency plan, but based on how this item ultimately is handled, it may change how we proceed. If the council makes a decision that they want us to maintain service lines up to and including the curb stop or the shutoff valves, that's a huge game change for the way our rate structure and our water enterprise fund and our maintenance crews are set up. I'm not saying that's a bad idea, but it's a major shift in how we do business right now. So I'd prefer to see the direction the city council prefers to go here, and then we will make changes accordingly.
Thank you. I don't believe you have. You may have the floor. Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Terry, one more question, because this is something that we discussed when I first got on the council almost 3 years ago about turning over control of water lines to the city from the homeowners, because there are some issues. And I know, Mr. Bloody, you have one of those issues where the water line is across the street, so you're responsible for cutting open the street. You're responsible for, You know, but that not only falls on business owners downtown, that falls on every single resident in Rapid City. If you live on a certain side of the street, you're the ones that's responsible for cutting the street open and replacing that line. And I'll give you another issue just from the county. We did the exact thing at the health department where we had to cut the road open. We had to run across the street to replace a water line. You know, and those are just examples from where I work, let alone the, like you said, hundreds of people or 100 people a year that do it. And Terry, or when you and I discussed this, I believe that you had some rough numbers of what it would cost the water department. I can't remember it because, like I said, that was almost 3 years ago. But it was a tremendous amount of money, a tremendous amount of money. And if we do decide to do that, which I think would be the right thing for the citizens, but also we've got to find a way to fund that. And it's either going to come out of some other programs or by some other fee, like the drainage utility fee, or some other, you know, somewhere that funding needs to come from. So I just want to put that out there. Thank you very much, and I'll relinquish. Thank you.
Points well taken, Mr. Roberts. And I just want to remind the committee that on this same agenda that we just approved is item number 13 is to request authorization for proposals for the water utility master plan update. And I just wanted to remind the committee that that is going to proceed. And perhaps some of these items that or issues that we're discussing at the moment could be pursued under that authorization as it moves forward. The chair will now, I'm going to throw the IT guys off here for a moment. The chair will proceed to Alderman Estes.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll make a motion that we have City Attorney Joel Lundin get with Mr. Blody and Mr. Gould and try to settle these two. And I'd like to keep the floor if I get a second.
Motion's made by Alderman Estes and seconded by Alderman Clayton to ask the owners or ask the city attorney's office to work with the owners of 610 and 701 Main Street. You may proceed, Mr. Estes.
Thank you. I might not fully understand it, but if I understand this, the city had a significant project in 1992 that went through Main and St. Joe, and it's renewed the service lines and the valves for most all these downtown businesses. And I understand the city's position on the service line belongs to the property owner. However, I don't think it really wasn't the service line didn't fail. It's the bolts. It's the style of bolts, and I think this project now we learned that we have cathodic protection. I mean, and supposedly maybe in '92 we didn't understand the soil, and maybe they didn't understand the cathodic protection and the anode beds, and so that component in my mind is what's missing here. The service line didn't fail, but we could have a gross failure of these bolts as time goes on. And in my mind, we've had two failures that cost each of these gentlemen $17,000 because they had the same guy do it. But so that's how much it costs to fix a one-off. Now, it must have been important enough for this city to recognize what was going on, because we did. I mean, the city designed this project in-house. It did go out for bids, and the bids reflected a cost of $12,000 per valve to dig up the street, go down and check it, and to inspect the condition of these bolts, and if they were bad and near failure, we were going to replace them. So, and we rejected as a group that bid because I believe upon the recommendation of Mr. Waltersdorf that he thought we could do it less expensive in-house. So, and I believe, if I understand him right, we do have a funding source. We have about $400,000. I mean, that's why you correct. I'm probably going to be a lot wrong, but I mean, that's why we went out to bid. As I understand, because there must have been a funding source available. And where I think we fall into some responsibility here is if we would have awarded this project, if we wouldn't have rejected all the bids, and if we would have awarded it, and let's say we were going to do the first 50 valves from east-north head west, and during that project, if upstream somebody's valve would have failed, I'm going to guess that we'd have had that contractor leapfrog up there and fix that, because that's what that's what we're doing. So for those reasons, I feel that we have a responsibility to sit at the table and make this right. And with that, I'll yield the floor.
Thank you. The chair will now recognize Alderwoman Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to bring up a couple points regarding this as well. There is a project that went out to replace the valves. That's one piece of this. The second piece is that there is currently a rate study, as the chairman had indicated, that we're having the water department and the wastewater take a look at the entire city as a whole. So that is under consideration. The fact that these two valves failed and have already been taken care of, that's done and over with. And so just wanted to give my opinion on a reimbursement. We've got time to work out whether there will be a reimbursement and identify a funding source for that reimbursement if it's going to happen and pass as council, because the fix is already in place for these businesses. So I have confidence that the city staff will be able to work something out and bring us recommendations on all of these points, because as Alderman Roberts did state, this may be precedent setting. And so if it is going to be precedent setting, I think we don't need to be making a knee-jerk reaction here for a quick fix decision. We need to take a look at it long-term and see how it's going to affect and see what the responsibility of the city should be going forward. And that is one of those items that Terry Wolsterstorff was bringing up is, where should the city's responsibility start and end on the infrastructure? So just wanted to bring up those clarifications. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. The chair will recognize once again Alderman Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I will support Mr. Estes' motion here. But one thing that I do want to reiterate, Terry, is if you would look into any past ones that have been paid for, because I believe that if we do eventually end up paying for these two, the right thing for the city to do is to go back and pay for the other ones too. And that would also, I have a question for Mr. Landine.
Mr. Landine?
That would take care of our legal, if somebody came back to sue us, if we take care of these gentlemen's, if we go back and take care of the past ones too, that will take our legal responsibility right off the table. If somebody...
Well, certainly. I mean, there's other things you can do when somebody comes from the past. If the claim was long enough ago, I mean, there's going to be statute of limitation issues and other ways to deny it. Whether or not you have a legal basis to deny it, I guess if ultimately we do reach a settlement with these gentlemen, you're going to need to decide morally whether or not you want to do it. At some point, you're probably going to have to draw a line and say we're not going to be able to pay any claims prior to this. But I think it would be a good idea. Let's look at, can we resolve these claims? And when I say resolve them, I really mean more than just being able to sit down and agree to a number with them. I think we also need to look at some of these issues about what are the consequences of this and what precedent does this set and how are we going to deal with this moving forward. And that is a discussion, but I would just like to have some more time to sit down, see if we can reach a settlement with these gentlemen and what we think the consequences of that are, come back, make a recommendation to you, so at least you have more information and can make the best decision on how to move forward.
And I agree that if we do go forward with this for reimbursement, it is going to set a precedence. But one thing that I think takes a little bit of that off the table is we as a city have known that this is an issue with this bolt problem for years. We have known that there's an issue out there, and we've known we're going to have to come in and fix it. So that makes it a little bit different than if somebody's service line is just 20 or 30 years old and you know, this has been an issue. So it's a it's a delicate one. It's one that I think we need to work through. And you know, we'll go forward from there. Hopefully Joel will come up with some good recommendations and the engineering department. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair would like to recognize Public Works Director Terry Walterstorff one more time.
Thank you. I would just like a little clarification from Alderman Roberts. When you ask how many more are there, are we talking about the valve failures in the downtown region? Are we talking about service line failures citywide? I mean, I'll give you some examples. We have, if we go out to shut a water service off at somebody's house for lack of payment and we can't get their curb stop to function, we send them a notice and we make them repair the curb stop. So is that one also?
Mr. Roberts.
We might have to sit down and talk for a long time. No, I'm just kidding, Terry. My understanding with this issue is it was a certain size valve, correct, that this bolt problem happened with? And it wasn't?
Mr. Tech.
Go ahead, Tech.
If I could clarify, there typically on the downtown projects, there were 6-inch service lines stubbed out, so there were 6-inch valves. The same issue is occurring on the city mains with the larger valves, the 8-inch, 10-inch, 12-inch valves. So it's the entire project regardless of the size of the valve and the location of the valve. That was the standard of construction back in 1990, whenever it was, to just bury your valves without cathodic protection. So it's not just the service line valves, it's the valves on the public main as well.
And that opens a whole new can of worms.
It does.
So, exactly. Well,
if I may make a suggestion is to allow the staff work with these two gentlemen to start with, and then perhaps some of these other additional questions can be resolved through the rate study that I mentioned in item number 13. So we can, Alderman Roberts, do you have another follow-up for us?
thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to make a secondary motion that we take this to council without recommendation. Maybe that will give Terry a little bit more time to bring a little more information back to us. And I think we need to discuss it. I think we're getting the cart before the horse here, going into dealing with these two gentlemen, because this sounds like it could be a huge problem citywide, and that's a different can of worms. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Roberts. I just want to make sure that everybody understands we're still on the original motion, is to allow the owners to visit with and discuss this for a resolution with the city staff. That's the current motion on the floor. There is no amendment to that. Okay. All lights are cleared off here. Thank you for that lively discussion. We are going to proceed to the vote to allow the owners to work with city staff. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. I have, let's do a roll call so I can get this on record. Brenda, if you will call the roll.
Estes. Nordstrom.
Aye.
Roberts. Scott. Clayton. It passes 3-2.
Thank you. So this item will be continued on to the council as allowing the staff to work with the landowners, the property owners. The item 18 is to petition to remove the barriers from the intersection near Enchantment Road and Stumer Road. This was brought forward by the Homeowners Associated President, Tim Matthew. The suggestion by the chair is to send this to full council without recommendation, and the chair will listen to the committee members at this time, recognizing Alderman Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and quite frankly, I'm dismayed that everybody left. We had a grand turnout from Ward 1 in that area, and we still do have a couple who remain, and I appreciate you doing that. I heard some things that frankly, I'm a little bit troubled about. There was mention of an Enchanted Hills Neighborhood Homeowners Association. On the flip side of that, we had people who said, nobody knocked on my door, nobody talked to me, I don't know where this came from. And I was hoping to be able to at least ask about the nature of this homeowners association, who it includes, who it doesn't include. It would be nice that if everybody lives in the neighborhood, that everybody would be considered at least an eligible member of that group, and thereby represented. Because one of the allegations made, and I'm not taking sides at all here, is that it seems to be a faction, if you will, of people who signed a petition, and another faction of people in that same neighborhood who feel like they weren't represented, didn't have a voice. And then what we end up with is basically two proponents who were here with their wives, so we could say 4 people, and then a larger number of people who were opponents. And I understand that, you know, it's a bigger issue than what perhaps we could come to understand here today. And my suggestion would be that we take this not to council and spend an entire evening trying to sift through, because what happens is people come to the podium, they speak for 3 minutes, and they're done. So what doesn't get said or doesn't get addressed as somebody comes to speak after them just doesn't get heard. And I think if we had a meeting in the neighborhood hosted by the city with the appropriate staff members, you know, we heard allegations of burglary and vandalism. So certainly, you know, we've got a law enforcement issue. We've got fire department issues in terms of emergency services. And I think if we had the right representation there and had an opportunity for the neighborhood at large to attend and really sift through the details, it would make the job more sensible for us as council members, rather than bringing all these people here on a Monday night, limiting them to 3 minutes, and you know, speak once and forevermore hold your peace. I think we really need to get to the bottom of it and understand in a greater sense what the real feeling is in that neighborhood, so that as we're called upon to make a decision, because it's just a yes or no decision, do the bollards stay or do they come out? And then everything that happens after that's one heck of a decision to make if we don't have all the information by which to make the decision. So I guess if I may, we've got some of the representative staff members here, and I'd like to know, you know, from a public works perspective, engineering, and police department, what the feeling is of city staff in terms of truly giving those neighborhood people a say, and outside of a Monday night council meeting where it might give us more to work with. And at that point, I'll rest, but I'd like to pose that question to our staff members who are present here tonight or today. Thank you.
And I will look to the committee for some guidance on this, because right now that is only the chair's recommendation to send this to the council without recommendation. And I know staff has got several comments and have made comments about this issue already, and the points that we need to take into consideration. If I may take your one point, is to the Enchanted Hills Homeowners Association was the group that brought this forward, and during that process, they probably only, and I'll use the word probably loosely here, is that they contacted their association first before they went to the people outside of their area. And that's perhaps one of the reasons why the rest of the community is not aware of that. The chair will now go to City Attorney Joel Landine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I should probably just refrain from speaking, but I'll put my 2 cents in. While it sounds very reasonable to have a meeting, I think you can have all the meetings in the world, and the people at the bottom of the hill between Stumer Road and Catron Boulevard aren't going to be happy if you remove the bollard, and the people up the hill that don't have the traffic issues, aren't going to have the people driving by, are going to be unhappy if you don't remove the bollards. And I don't know that any number of meetings is going to probably change that result. You know, when Walmart came in, the sole reason the bollards were put in was because the neighbors requested them. It was done to accommodate them. It was originally across half the road to facilitate emergency vehicle and other access, and people just drove around them. So that's why they were extended all the way across the road. Then when they were extended all the way across the road, people drove across lawns to go around them. So then the city placed boulders to prevent that. But it was never staff that recommended, or it wasn't traffic considerations from staff or the developers that necessitated these. They were put in solely at the request of the people who were proponents of the request today, and they aren't going to be happy if they're removed, and I don't think any number of meetings is going to change that.
Appreciate those comments, Mr. Landine. Thank you for your patience. Alderwoman Scott, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make the motion to send this to council without recommendation and retain the floor if I can have a second.
Motion been made and second to send it without recommendation to the full council for Monday night's consideration. You have the floor, Alderwoman Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The reason, primarily, that we're sending it to council without recommendation is this council chamber for this meeting was full of proponents and a couple proponents and many opposition. And it was indicated at the beginning of this meeting that this was most likely going to go to council, and so I would like to at least send it to council. I do appreciate Joel Ledine's, the city attorney's comments, as I think even if the direction from the city council is eventually, as Alderman Clayton recommended, some type of neighborhood meeting or some type of education or gathering of data from the citizens, I don't think sending this to council without recommendation for Monday night is going to deter that from happening either. So I think this is the best course of action, and I appreciate the second. The other considerations, and I don't really want to go into it since we are sending this to council without recommendation for Monday night, is I know I've got a couple questions as far as what it would take for the city to remove the bollards. Can we just take a bulldozer over there, just remove them and, pave over and everything else, or does it take some other type of procedure? Action from the council? Was it part of the stipulation for Walmart being built? I mean, there's a lot of other questions that I'm sure will come out Monday night in order to really kind of vet this, and I'll wait until Monday night before I ask any more questions. But I really just wanted to go on record as why I'm recommending this to go to council without recommendation. Thank you. I yield the floor.
Thank you. The chair will recognize Alderman Estes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm going to support this for nothing else, just to buy a little time to think about this a little bit more. Just so everybody knows, I built 221 and 223 Enchantment. I lived in 223 for not quite a year, so I'm familiar with that traffic. And just my call, maybe you've driven up there, but I believe 255 Enchantment is the last house at the corner of Stumer where it's closed. So then up above is the 300. And I guess one of the things that gives me a little bit of pause about pulling this out is when you look at the petition that's signed, the closest party is in the 600 block. I'm not sure. I have a little bit different thought than the gentleman that did his traffic study having a cup of coffee. To me, if you took those bollards out, the people in the 200 block might actually have a little bit of reduction in traffic. You're going to gain some coming out of the apartments, but the people up above won't be coming by because they'll go on Stumer. So I'm not 100%. We won't know. Nobody will know until it's taken out. But I can sure see the people in the 300 block of Stumer and on up, and the people in the 300, 400, and 500 block of Enchantment having a significant, I think, impact. And so anyway, I just need to think about this a little bit. And I guess I do have a question now. That it was due to public comment, and those bollards were put in as a stipulation of Walmart getting their building permit. Is that? I mean, that's. So I guess can we do whatever we want, or can we just change that stipulation now? If I could ask a question.
May I direct that question to Ms. Fisher from the Community Development?
The stipulation of approval actually read that prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy, that the bollard barriers within the westbound lane west of the approach into Eagle Ridge Apartments and the barriers within the eastbound lane of Stumer Road directly east of the intersection of Stumer Road and Enchantment Road shall be constructed as per the approved construction plans. That was done. That stipulation was met. We did visit with the city attorney's office prior to today's meeting, and they've indicated, however, that this is public right-of-way. It's not a part of the Walmart project. The city still owns this right-of-way, and we have final jurisdiction as to the design of this street. Remember, too, that what's out there today is different than what this stipulation reads, so it's not in compliance of the stipulation regardless. Mr. Chair, if I might continue.
Please.
We've had some discussion today about the traffic that could be generated and what someone sitting on their backyard may not have seen. On the agenda today, as an attachment, you'll see something that's labeled 6/28/2010 City Council Agenda Information. And when you click on that, you're going to see a whole bunch of links. In the midst of those is something known as a revised traffic information. That is a report that was done by a traffic engineer and was presented to the city for the Walmart project. They addressed the cut-through traffic at the request of the neighborhood. On page 35 of that report, you will see a summary of what they feel is the result of the Walmart and even the Eagle Ridge and the existing traffic that was there at that time. So I encourage you to read that before City Council, and I think that'll answer a lot of your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher.
I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Estes. And I know other staff would like to weigh in on this as well, and you certainly have this opportunity at this time, or if you want to save it for Monday night, you certainly can have that option. Mr. Billings, any additional comments? I know we've heard from your department as well, and also the city engineering department. So in addition to hearing both sides, there is a third side, and that is the city's version as well. And there is some history with this involved. So I just, as being the chair, I liked hearing all sides of the arguments before I make a decision, and I support the concept of sending this to the full council without recommendation at this time. So everyone can choose to make their voices known at that meeting at that time. The chair will now call for a vote on this to send it to council without recommendation. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. Item 19 is Lazy P Land Company Incorporated request, excuse me, request for city commitment to design, build remaining 30% plus or minus of MP 203. And the chair is looking for recommendation. Mr. Kostanowski, if you care to give us a little, shed the light on this, a little background on your request.
Thank you. My name is Lawrence M. Kostaneski with Centerline, representing Lazy P6. I'm not Lazy P6. I represent them. And it's pronounced Kostaneski, just the way it's spelled. It's phonetic, you see. And Richie Nordstrom and I have known each other for 20 years. And he knows how it's pronounced, but chooses not to.
My apologies. My apologies.
Now, this item, I don't know how many agendas it's been on. And the recommendation from Public Works is acknowledge the request. At this point, I don't even know what that means. I feel like I'm playing a game with the Mad Hatter. So you were looking for a recommendation here a little bit ago, and you pointed to me. I saw Terry go, oh no, don't get a recommendation from him. Here's a suggestion. I know there are at least two of you that can make a motion in a second. Now, I'm assuming you've read what's attached from the former Public Works Director and the current one in December. He has changed his position, evidently, starting in February. So I'm not sure. But to me, it's pretty simple. You either say, yes, we are going to confirm the commitment made by prior Public Works Director in April of 2011, reinstated by current Public Works Director in December of 2013, or we're going to change our mind and go with the Public Works Director's most recent recommendation to not do anything. And I'm going to let him, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think that's what his most recent recommendation is. Thank you.
Mr. Walterstorff?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I actually still stand by my letter dated back in December. The only thing that changed really is this. There seemed to be some reluctance to move the project forward and annex property. Keep in mind the funding source we were using, that I was proposing to use here, was the stormwater utility funding. Stormwater utility funding, those revenues are based on the fees that are charged to properties within the city limits. Okay, so I had a little reluctance to bring forward a funding request to fund the design and construction of a metering pond outside of city limits. I did have some reluctance to do that. Having said that, I will tell you this. I just sat in a CIP planning meeting this morning with my staff. We have this project programmed in for 2015 in the CIP that we will be proposing to the CIP committee here in May, if things go well. So the design money is in the operations budget that has already been approved by the city council. We'll spend about $40,000 on the design. I think overall the project was a little over $300,000. That's our estimate right now. But again, it seemed like things kind of got bogged down into some discussions, I guess, this winter. Things weren't moving forward, and I just was a little reluctant to bring the recommendation forward until I saw some movement from the developer.
Thank you. Just want to remind the committee, we do not have a motion on the floor. The chair's recommendation is to acknowledge, and then Mr. Konstanowski. I'm going to take a couple, 3 times before I get that correct.
Oh,
Ski?
I'll write it out for you with syllables and stuff.
Yes.
It's simple.
Again,
you know what
my
a lot of council people have done over the years? They just refer to me as Ski. You know, like Cher and Sade and people like that. They know who I am. It's not like I got here last night.
Understand. Thank you for the admonishment.
Even the mayor does that, by the way.
Thank you for the admonishment. The chair will look to the committee for a motion or further discussion. See, the recommendation from the chair is to acknowledge the request. Chair will recognize Alderwoman Scott.
I'll make the motion to acknowledge this item, and I'd like to retain the floor if I can have a second.
Motion made by Alderwoman Scott, second by Alderman Estes to acknowledge the request. You have the floor.
Thank you. I am going to go ahead and make this motion to acknowledge this item at this time with a caveat that, according to our Public Works Director, Mr. Walterstorff, this item is being considered on the CIP for the month of May. And so I will be looking at the CIP meeting minutes to see what the direction is and to follow up and make sure that this project is being identified and being discussed at the Public Works Department. So that's the reason I'm moving to acknowledge this item at this time. Thank you. I yield the floor.
Thank you. Chair will now recognize Alderman Estes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So could I ask Mr. Waltersdorf a question, please?
You may.
So Terry, if CIP passes this in May, then we're on our way. Is that what, do I understand that correctly?
That's correct. And it's Walterstorff, it's phonetic.
So now, Mr. Chair, may I ask Mr. Lawrence Konstanowski a question?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to start this name thing.
Yeah.
He's Terry, I'm Ski.
Does that, if it passes, Mr. Ski, if this passes in May, and does that commitment satisfy you then?
Well, to me, to my client, it's a difference without a distinction, and here's why. If you read Terry's letter of the 13th, argue with me. He's essentially making a commitment and thanks P6 for their patience while they work through this. Now, you could interpret his comments as being working through a process that hasn't quite been worked through yet. I think that's fair. I guess that's the windy way of saying yes.
All right, thank you. I yield.
Not seeing any other lights, the chair will move to proceed with the vote. Again, just a reminder, the motion is to acknowledge the request. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Item 20 is Lazy P Land Company Incorporated at 5th and Capron Intersect retrofit. And I need a little more background. If I may proceed to Mr. Ski.
Thank you. P6 didn't think you had enough issues regarding their property, so they decided to add one. But your staff is well aware of this because we've been in discussion with them about the continuing evolution of the intersection of 5th and Catron Boulevard. And it has, in fact, been an evolution. In fact, before the meeting, I sent an email to one of Dale's staff people. I believe you were copied, and I believe Terry was copied, that goes into considerable detail about the newest change to that intersection that the city wants. Okay? You guys have not seen this before. It's all been staff. So, if I could make a humbly suggested motion, committee directs staff to work directly with the developer to see if there is some compromise available for the specific request, which is for the city to make it their project. Okay, now, we've talked a little bit back and forth about this, but P6 is making it formal now, particularly with these newest alignment changes. That gets it off your table, and P6 doesn't have to do another acknowledge request, which, I mean, if you sit and think about it, really doesn't mean anything. So that's a humble suggestion, and I would look for Terry or Dale to have something added to that, maybe.
Chair will recognize City Engineer Dale Tech.
Thank you for getting my name correct.
Yeah, but come on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, I've got a question for Ski, if you don't mind. Are you requesting that the city perform the design and construction of the project to construct 5th Street from?
No, sir. That's not what I meant. You have a signal project, a signal retrofit project, which is being done by others. I assume the plans are pretty close to being done. That's what P6 is referring to, because when you and I negotiated the scope of the current approved oversize agreement, this really wasn't brought up. This came about in last year sometime. John Less was still here, actually, and you guys reconfigured some lanes. You wanted an exclusive right, north to east right, and so we shifted lanes a little bit then. And at that time, the idea of a retrofit came up to the signal system, and you guys went out and hired HDR, yeah? And they came back, and of course the wheels fell off. So it's that portion. P6 is well aware that 5th Street is an oversized project, just like it's anticipated in the oversized agreement. But this evolution at 5th Street and Catron Boulevard is really the subject of discussion, not 5th Street proper. No.
I'm still confused.
Mr. Tech, go ahead.
Yes, HDR is under contract to do a signal retrofit.
Mm-hmm.
What, are you requesting addition to that, or
No.
I don't understand your request.
Mr. Ski, I guess I got to admit too, I'm a little confused about what you're requesting on this.
Okay. You all have this attached. You have it attached, Dale? The drawing under this item, 20, whatever it is?
Yes, we've seen the drawing, or at least I've seen the drawing. I
There
shouldn't
we go.
speak for the committee members, but yes, we have that drawing.
Right here. This is the intersection that's to have the signal retrofit. Yes? Right?
Yes.
Okay. That is the portion of the project that P6 suggesting, requesting, the city just take that and do it. Just do it. And that's part of what the email is today, because I really can't tell precisely. If there are some contemplated changes based on these new lane configurations, they're going to be made to the existing concrete pavement, that be included it as well. And when that's done, P6 will just pick up the edges, just like they had planned to do 2 years ago, and pull Fifth Street to the south, just like they had always planned to do. This part, which came after you and I went through the oversized agreement scope and costs.
Dale, you can answer that, but if I can interject a couple of thoughts, is that the chair would also like to make sure that I have the understanding that the city provided a template, not a design, of this area, and then also I'm going to throw the big elephant in the room into this, is that the annexation is not on the table yet, but at least this chair would like to see that come forward as well. And you may proceed with the answer on this question.
Well, I guess I'm still not quite clear on what his request is. However, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, he's saying that they don't want to consider any of the improvements in the intersection as part of the oversize. That should be a standalone city project that gets done, and then you can take Fifth Street and go south. Is that what you're saying?
That's pretty much on the money, yes, sir.
So I'm glad I finally understood that. As far as these lines on this drawing and such, city staff spent a half a day, one day, trying to provide a template to give to Mr. Davis's lazy P6 design engineer to do the design for Fifth Street. Are there impacts to the intersection? Absolutely. We don't know what those are. The design has not been finished. There was not a design performed by city staff to do that. And that's also beyond the scope of HDR's involvement in this project. They were strictly hired to do the signal retrofit. A little clarification on that, as HDR communicated with the South Dakota Department of Transportation about the signal, because it is a state signal, it's not a city signal. The state said, have you looked at these lane configurations? And HDR's response was, no, we haven't, but we'll do that. So they did. The state came back and said, it's not going to work. We either want a full-blown traffic impact study, or you're going to build the template that you see here. So that's where we've gotten today.
And P6 accepts, except you're going to read the email and you'll see that there's lots of questions about some of the details. It can be built that way, but some questions need to be asked. It's the interface between that template, which is different than the template they provided last year, for the reasons Dale noted. When the city sets the edge inside the Catron Boulevard right-of-way, P6 can take it from there, which is exactly what they planned to do 2 years ago, except the edge has now changed for the second time. So that's why, and maybe not, rather than say acknowledge the request, simply, the motion humbly suggested again, staff work with P6 and see if there's a split of responsibility that makes some sense. Otherwise, we just keep acknowledging requests that doesn't get anyone anywhere.
The chair will take that into consideration, and if anybody wants to amend the motion to acknowledge this, they certainly may, but the discussion at this point is getting down very deep into the weeds, and if we could pursue this in a different fashion, in a different forum, to have this, you folks get together and work out the details. That way we get to deal with the 30,000-foot level discussion, and at that point we'd be able to better understand what your desire is, what the city's desire is, because at this point we're so far down into the weeds on it, it's causing a lot of confusion. So at least on the chair's request of this is to allow you folks to have that discussion. I only have the two requests that I've made earlier to have part of that discussion. The chair will now recognize Alderman Estes, and I'll get over to
Thank you, Mr.
City
Chair.
Engineer.
I got a question, and either one can take it, Mr. Tech or Mr. Woltersdorf, but I got a question. I mean, this intersection, I mean, Catherine Boulevard and the design of this intersection, that was a state project, wasn't it? And my question is how do we get involved in creating a misalignment when that intersection wasn't our design to begin with? Or maybe I'm barking up the wrong tree, but here, please help me. How do you get from there to here?
Mr. Tech.
Yes, you are correct. The project was a state highway project. Catron Boulevard is a state highway in that reach. The city didn't have any input as to the design alignment for the south leg of that. Certainly the north leg, when Walmart came in, north leg of 5th Street, Walmart did a traffic impact study, added lanes. That was all approved by the State Department of Transportation. The city had no involvement on that south leg. Didn't know what the traffic volumes were, didn't have a traffic study to provide input to the DOT, not that the DOT asked for the input from the city for that particular thing. So you are correct. We didn't have any involvement in that. Now we're trying to retrofit the intersection to try to make it work going south. And I believe what Lazy P6 is requesting is, city, you take care of the intersection and we'll take it from there. In my opinion, that's still some of the oversized cost. That improvements to that intersection to accommodate that road going south should still be part of the oversizing.
You still have the floor, Mr. Estes.
Well, I appreciate that, but quite frankly, I'm speechless. So I mean, I don't quite know what Dale means, and I'm trying to figure out is who wasn't talking to who. I mean, that these two don't line up. I mean, is this? I mean, was the state not communicating with P6, or was P6 not communicating with the state? I'm just trying to figure out.
I can't speak to that because I do not know what conversations the state and P6 had at the time. They must have had some because I believe there was some right-of-way acquired from P6 by the State Department of Transportation. Certainly the city wasn't involved in any of that since it's not in city limits. It was a county property that the DOT was dealing with. So.
Okay, so when you say part of this is part of the oversize, are you saying, I mean, if P6's engineer is asking for us to do this intersection, you're talking about like 3 lanes of it or so would be part of the oversize? Or I guess I'm trying to get a clarification on that.
The intersection obviously exists today, and there was a slight extension to the south. The curb returns were put in, and a bit of pavement was extended to the south. It doesn't quite line up today, or what was put in doesn't line up today with what the DOT is saying that needs to be there for lane configuration. Just doesn't quite line up. The DOT, back when they did it, they didn't consider what the final lane configuration would be there because they didn't have a traffic impact study to go off for one reason or another. I can't speak to what the DOT and Lazy P6 conversed about regarding that intersection. Where we're at today is what is in place there at that intersection on the south leg doesn't match up with the lanes that the DOT says needs to be there. So I believe, as I'll reiterate, I believe what P6's request is, DOT, you fix what's going on in the intersection and we'll just tie onto it and go south. And I still think that that's part of the oversizing, that it's not necessarily the city's responsibility to correct that issue that occurred with the DOT when it was constructed back then.
Okay, I got one more question. P6 engineer has asked us to make a motion for staff to work with P6 to resolve this. Do you feel that at present you're still working with them?
We've been working with them for quite some time and will continue to do so. So I guess I'm a bit confused why the request is coming today. We sent that template 2 months ago and apparently received an email today in regards to that. So we'll certainly consider the email that was sent today and provide comments to that. I don't know if it'll be to the satisfaction of the owner and his engineer.
Mr. Estes, you still have the floor.
I yield.
Thank you. The chair will now recognize Alderwoman Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion to table this item.
Motion has been made and second to table this item. The chair is requesting a little clarification on the table in motion is to discontinue discussions or allow the discussions to proceed.
Based on the answer that was just given, there is already communication and they're working on this. It seems like there's a lot of unanswered questions at this point. Therefore, at this time, I'm tabling this. I'm making the recommendation we table this item.
Thank you.
Got it.
Yes.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. The motion is made and seconded to table item number 20. Does everybody understand the motion? The motion is to table. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Not seeing any other items on the agenda, Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Motion by Alderman Estes, second by Alderwoman Scott to adjourn. Those in favor? Those opposed? A meeting adjourned.